XLRI and a PhD in marketing from Virginia Tech at Carlson. A winner of the 1987 Robert Pepper Award for interdisciplinary research on consumer behavior, and a winner of the 2000 Maynard Award for contribution to marketing theory. His research has appeared in various scholarly journals, including the Harvard Business Review. Currently, Professor R is working on several research and consulting projects, including consumer choice, non-traditional pricing strategies, communicating quality to uninformed consumers, and developing the brand-centric organizations. Friends, please put your hands together in welcoming Dr. Akshay R.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that very kind introduction. I suspect my mother had a hand in writing that. So I was thinking about how to engage you for the next hour or how much time do I have? An hour and a half. Somebody's going to keep tabs on time because I think lose track of time. And here's a scary thought. I speak to various kinds of audiences all over the world. And most of the time it's quite easy because I tend to know more than them. But talking to you guys, I'm a little nervous. Because I can imagine myself sitting in the back row there next to Shagun and my friends Ramu and Vishu and the rest sitting next to me saying, what does that gray beard know that we don't know? And the answer is not much. So the spin I want to put on this talk is I graduated in 1980. That is 35 years ago. So if in 1980 a prior alum who had graduated 35 years prior had come to speak to us, he or she would have graduated in 1945. So imagine what that person would have seen in those 35 years. India was not independent in 1945. The Second World War had just ended. War had just been discovered. There's so many innovations that were occurring not just in India but across the world that were brand new that we in 1980 took for granted. So by the same token, I want you to think about what you will tell the class of 2050 when you come to talk to them 35 years from now. Just anticipate the future and think about it in two ways. The first way is what are the changes that you think will happen? And I suspect that 99% of your predictions will be wrong. Okay? It's very difficult to predict, particularly if you're making predictions about the future. A philosopher named Yogi Berra was also a great baseball player once. The second is, think about the things that will not change. What are the fundamental things that we can take for granted about human behavior, about the way organizations work, about the way institutions work, about the way governments work, that will not change? Things that you can take for granted. So that's the background or the mental model I want you to have in mind as I go through what I want to share with you. In addition, please stop me, ask questions. I've been promised that this is going to be interactive. I don't care if I get through all my slides. I would much rather have a conversation with you and learn from you. And I have been told on good authority that there are class participation funds available for me. Okay? So those are the two mental models I want you to put in place. And let me start by telling you what I plan to do. I'm going to give you a little preview of my view of the world. Okay, I'm going to give you a little structure. Then I'm going to show you some literature from economics, which led to the Nobel Prize for George Akerlof, Michael Spence, and Joe Stiglitz. I'm also going to show you some literature from psychology that led to the Nobel Prize for Danny Kahneman, who was a psychologist by training, but got the Nobel Prize in economics. Both these fields have informed a lot of my research, and then I'm going to try and put everything together. Hopefully, you will see it come together. Okay? Good. Any questions so far? All right. Let me start by asking you a question. What are the 3 deadliest words in the English language in one sentence? 3 words, put them together in a sentence. What are the 3 deadliest words? Those are the 3 most difficult words. Very hard for people to say, I don't know. You ask somebody a question, they will always give you an answer. And there's a literature on online attitude construction that shows that even if people have no attitudes towards something, you ask them a question, they will develop an attitude online, they won't say, I don't know. Okay? Good guess. Anything else? Anybody else?
It is impossible.
It is impossible. Those are deadly. Why are they deadly or not? Okay? That's a good guess. Anybody else?
I'm sorry.
I am sorry. Are deadly? It doesn't normally, it works well. You apologize. Look at it. Very Clinton did today. She said, I'm sorry. And I was... Anybody else? Right. See, I started a train of thought. Now you're thinking of Donald Trump. Anybody else? No, it's not. I noticed the ladies being awfully quiet.
It's like the other person saying to you, you don't know.
You don't know. Okay. All right. Anything else? I know everything. Okay? Those would get you in trouble. Alright, a little bit of a trick question. This is the prelude to what I'm going to talk to you about. The 3 most deadliest words, 3 most dangerous words are, honey, what's wrong? Right? Not only should you know what's wrong, you should have defined your role in creating the problem, and now you should have fixed it. Okay? Now, it's a cute little way of introducing this idea. Imagine if your brand was able to anticipate the problems of consumers before they realize they have a problem and fix it. Then you will never have the honey what's wrong problem. And it is a very desirable state of affairs because you've solved the consumer's problem before they realize it. And because you fixed it, you gain tremendous monopoly advantage over that consumer. And I'll show you some illustrations in a minute. Okay? So that's one preliminary thought. The second, I have a colleague I teach in the executive MBA program at Carlson, and one of my colleagues who teaches finance. He teaches the following principle. Get the cash, get the cash, get the cash. If you're running a business, get the money. And fortunately for me, I follow him in finance company for marketing. And so I introduce marketing to the students as, that's a great principle. I will show you where the cash is. Who has the cash? Because the cash doesn't grow on trees. It belongs to consumers and customers. And your job as an organization is to present them a value proposition so that they will give you the cash in exchange for goods or services or whatever else you provide. Okay? So that's why my personal belief is marketing is not just a discipline, it's the orientation of the entire firm. You want to be focused on delivering value to customers because without customers, you don't have a business. Okay. All right, let me give you a couple more motivational illustrations. Here is some desired data. On the horizontal axis, I've got categories, and on the vertical axis, I have a measure of repeat purchase. Okay? And these are various categories. So, for example, ready-to-eat cereal, about 10% of the time, people buy the same brand again. Okay? Toothpaste, it's about 30% of the time. Soap, it's about 50% of the time. So if you're a brand, and these are means, so there's a distribution around each one of those dots. So if you're a brand manager for a firm in one of those categories, you look at that, and if you're in the toilet tissue category, you're doing really well relative to the guys in cookies. Right? So you should be pleased with yourself. Unless you look at that and say, look, if my view of the world is to develop a monopoly relationship with my customers. Okay? Imagine if you have a significant other or a spouse who spends 50% of his or her nights with you and 50% with somebody else. What kind of a relationship is that? Is that a close, intimate relationship? Or is there some shopping going on? And if it is the latter, what does that mean for your brand's relationship and its intimacy with customers? Okay? So my goal today is to show you how that is an organizing business principle and show you some ways we can get to it by developing a closer understanding of consumers and knowing when we have it and when we don't. Okay? Here's another example. This is a brand that should be familiar with to most of you. It's a very, very diversified brand, from movies to toys to theme parks. And let me give you a little example of what a trip to Disney World is like. If you have small children, you arrive late in the evening, you rent a car, that you go to a hotel that's shaped like an automobile. Your children are jumping for joy. They're in Disney. Okay? You arrive late in the evening, the park doesn't open until 9:30 the following morning. But they want to go to the park right now. So somehow you get them to bed. They wake up about 3:30 or 4 in the morning because they want to go to the park. And you try and keep them quiet by turning the TV on. And there's the Disney Channel for sure. By about 6:30, you feed them some breakfast, which is lots and lots of sugar and carbohydrates. So they're jumping out of their skin. You go to the park. You get in, and it's about $50, $60, $70 per head to get in. You walk in, and there's Mickey. There is Minnie. And there is somebody selling a container of Coca-Cola, which is about this size, for $18. And there is somebody selling sweatshirts. And it's 9:30, and I'm already out $350. I can't wait for the day to end. And that's the way the whole day goes. You know, lots of money being spent, children demanding lots of things. Fortunately, last time I went, I found a restaurant that serves wine for lunch, so that took the edge off the visit a little bit. And then by the evening, there are fireworks. The fireworks are magnificent. But you are trying to persuade your little children, let's go back to the hotel. We can watch the fireworks from there. We can watch it on TV. It'll be so much nicer. No, they insist on staying. And so you stay. And right at about 10 o'clock, a little hand reaches up and grabs you by the little finger and says, Ed, you are the greatest. And all of a sudden, all is forgiven. Notice what these guys have done. They've taken a boatload of my money, and they have convinced me to be a good parent. You have to take your children to Disney. You take them to any other theme park, it's not the same. Okay? So they have short-circuited my prefrontal cortex and gone straight to my limbic brain and touched an emotional chord that says, got to spend money on my kids. Because they have. And that's what's most important. Here's another less convoluted example. This is a brand of cereal. Those of you who are familiar with it, it is manufactured by the General Mills Corporation, which is headquartered in Minneapolis, and which is the generous sponsor of my chair. So I'm obligated to feature a General Mills product in any talk I give. And the story going around is that this is the most trusted brand in America. Why? This is the first solid food that babies are given because parents trust children. There are any number of knockoff cereals. There are any number of other kinds of cereals. But this, in the case of 98 or 99% of children, is the first solid food. So, here is one trust. So, here's one final thing. Many years ago, I went to this hotel in Malaysian Borneo, just to give you a sense of how beautiful it is. That's the lobby. And my children were little, and however much you love your children, after 3 days at a resort, they start to get on your nerves. But they had something called the Bubbles Club. The Bubbles Club was not a babysitting facility, it was an activity place. So the children wouldn't just sit around watching TV. The suite was converted to taking care of the children. They would play games and have activities. And everybody in my group was so touched by the thoughtfulness of the hotel in providing this option for parents. They had anticipated our need to get rid of our children. And now I think the cynical marketing professor I asked noticed that now we have the time to go horseback riding and drink margaritas and watch the sunset, play golf, and do all these other high-margin activities for the hotel. So they were smiling all the way to the bank. We wouldn't have been able to do any of those things if we'd been watching our children. So while we were being thoughtful about our needs, they were making money hand over fist with their thoughtfulness. So when I talk about understanding consumers, here's the template I want you to think about. Those of you who are taking your first marketing class are probably familiar with this categorization scheme. The 4 P's: the product, the price, the place, the promotion, and the people you want to go after. This is the first analytical template that you're exposed to. You want to think about consumers intimately. You want to think about what products they want, what promotions will appeal to them, where they shop, and what their price sensitivity is. And people come up with a program for their brand. Well, it turns out that if you understand your consumers intimately, you will come up with better programs than if you don't. For example, how many of you are familiar with this product, a home pregnancy test? Good. So, those of you who are not, this is a little package with some chemicals in it that if you are interested in finding out whether you're pregnant or not, you can purchase this, take it home, and test. And the hormones in your urine will tell whether you are pregnant or not. Okay? So it's a fairly standard product. It's a pharmaceutical product, regulated and so forth. Now, any standard marketing approach would say, let me look at women of childbearing age who are interested in finding out whether they are pregnant or not. Right? Well, it turns out it's a little more complicated than that. There are at least 2 segments. There are the hopefuls. I want to know whether I'm pregnant because I want a baby. And there are the fearfuls. Oh my God. I don't remember what exactly happened in that wetness, the term I heard recently, but I want to make sure that I didn't do it untoward. 2 different motives, okay? People who want the baby and people who are afraid that they might be having a baby. You have 2 identical products that are branded differently, that are packaged differently, that are located in the store in different places, and are priced differently. All with very good reason. Okay? So a little thinking about market segments will reveal to you the opportunities that a first cut analysis would not. So just because you have a template, be careful about how you use it because there's often more nuance to it. Yes? Questions at this point? Anybody? Yes, sir.
So, why was there a price difference between the 2 products?
Good question.
How did it impact the consumer?
Right.
Consumer behavior.
So think about it the other way around. Which consumer is going to be less or more price sensitive? Right? I'm anxious to find out if I'm having a baby or not. Right? And if I have a positive motive, the price doesn't enter my equation. That was what their research showed. Whereas the people who are, maybe I'm having a baby, maybe I'm not, I'm afraid I might be having a baby, I'm afraid I'm not, how much is it I'm willing to pay to find out? Well, their price sensitivity was higher. And so the price they charge more different. Okay. Good. Getting close to consumers is not something that is restricted to consumer packaged goods. Okay, this is a question I frequently get from my students, particularly those who are engineers. This is all very well, but I sell drill bits. Getting close to my customer, I go visit them all the time. So just because you're in a B2B market doesn't mean all this stuff is irrelevant. And if you think it is, I'll give you one word to counter that argument. Intel. How many of you 15 years ago could tell the difference, not 15, 25 years ago, for a certain type of drug or types of drugs. Guesses? Okay, here's one. It's a drug called Propecia. Propecia is a drug that is used to cure something called male pattern baldness. And if you lose your hair, you take Propecia and it arrests the hair loss. The other possibility is, come on, people, surely I can read your mind, I know what you're thinking. Notice I don't have a visual to accompany that. So they charge more money for these kinds of products and get away with it. Consumers are willingly paying higher prices. Why? Because there's value in having an anonymous exchange. If you are intimately in tune with your customers, you know this. If you're not, if you're looking at the macro data, you say, oh, prices are dropping a bit. Otherwise, not. And there are many, many, many industries in which you can take advantage of the internet to actually raise your prices. Okay, here's one last example. If you're close to customers, good things happen. There's a restaurant chain in the US called Le Pain Quotidien, which is a fancy French way of saying my daily bread. Okay? Now, how many of you have heard of economics? Okay, good. So here's this lady having lunch at Le Pain Quotidien. They make organic salads and soups, and they have a mission of making very healthy food. And she discovered a field mouse in her salad. Okay? A dead mouse in her salad. And whether she was a vegetarian or not, she was not happy. She screamed, and Steve Dubner from Economics happened to be sitting at the next table. He took a picture of that, and he posted it on his blog, and it suddenly achieved great infamy. So the owner of the restaurant took the food away, the food, gave her coupons to last a lifetime, and so forth. Everybody apologized. Terrible thing to happen. Would have done any brand yet, right? Especially after social media got a hold of it. Well, not really. The woman who got served the rodent at Le Pain Quotidien still eats there, till today, at the same restaurant, all the time. She respects and admires their organic mission. She forgave them for the mouse entirely. Le Pain Quotidien kept her trust. Yes?
Could you go to the coupons?
No, she rejected the coupons, and she continued. She wants. So this is an interesting day. I'm not going to talk about this today, but this is an interesting phenomenon that we've been investigating recently. How many of you have heard of a phenomenon called pay what you want? Customers are allowed to pay whatever they want for the product. Okay, if you've heard of that. How many of you heard of a rock band called Radiohead? Okay, so they launched an album. It's an independent British rock band called In Rainbows, where this was their 6th or 7th album. They told their customers, download it and pay whatever you want. And people paid, right? One reason they paid was because they wanted the band to continue to live. So one reason she pays is she wants this restaurant to continue to live because she promised their mission. So it's not just altruism, but it's self-interest. I want you to not die, and so I'll make sure that you continue to live. And one way to do that is to pay. Just in case you think this is all mumbo-jumbo management talk, let me show you some science that supports all of it. So this is a study done at Baylor University at their medical school, and here's what they did. They got a whole lot of people and put them into a magnetic resonance imaging scanner. You all know what an MRI machine is? Right? So they put them into the scanner, and they told them that you are going to be tasting either Coca-Cola or a generic carbonated soft drink. Okay? And then, when they were lying in the scanner, their brains were being scanned. And when they looked at the scans, they compared the activation when they thought they were going to get Coke, with the activation when they thought they were going to get a generic carbonated soft drink. And what I have for you up there, if there's anything else you remember from this talk, remember that when they saw the Coca-Cola, when they thought they were going to drink Coca-Cola versus the generic soft drink, their bilateral hippocampus and their dorsolateral prefrontal cortex got activated. What does that mean? How many of you are medicine or biology in your background? Okay, so what does that mean? What is your name? Okay, tell me what that means.
So it means stimulated part of their brain, the nerves there is stimulated at a certain.
And what are those two areas associated with?
Stimulation, excitement.
Arousal and emotional activation. So what was happening was the people who thought they were going to taste Coca-Cola were going, I'm going to get Coke. And the people who thought they were going to get a generic soft drink were going, okay, I'm going to get a generic soft drink. Right? They hadn't tasted anything yet. That is the power of the brain, man. The power of the brain to get you all excited and salivating, and your brain is going, yeah, I'm going to drink Coke. Okay? Just to complete the story, they ran the study with Pepsi, and everybody's so short their shows. Okay? I know Pepsi's under word, so to belabor the point, but every time I tell the story, there's somebody from Pepsi in the audience who goes, no, that's not true. Our customers love us, and that's probably true. This is a small sample. All I'm doing is showing you that I can actually look into people's brains and tell what effect my brain is having on them. Are they excited about this? Are they willing to pay me more money? Do they trust me? All sorts of things. Okay? Is there a question here? No? 11:30. Okay. So, if I can generate an intimate relationship with my customers, the way I have a relationship with my children. Look at the things my children get. They get rent-free accommodation. They get an allowance, which is a monopoly price. They get positive word of mouth. Every time I get a chance, I talk positively about them. And every time my son drives into my garage and dings my car, I do not put him up for adoption because I haven't yet. Forgive him. Hey, it's okay. Nobody got hurt. Right? This is what happens for parents as well. They get lower costs. Okay? They get monopoly prices. They get positive word of mouth. They get forgiveness, like the plant quotidian case. So this is a desirable thing to do, both from a strategic standpoint as well as a science standpoint. If you look at the underlying science of what happens, you look at the data, it is a desirable thing to do in many contexts, not just with customers. Okay, I mentioned this in passing. If you have a powerful brand, people want to work with you. They want to work for you. You get better quality vendors, you get better quality employees, you get a whole set of resources outside the consumption. Okay? So, if you can develop intimacy like a parent does with a child, and those of you who don't recognize those two people, that's Gwyneth Paltrow and her mother, Blythe Danner. You get that close, that you can anticipate their needs before they articulate them, then you are so far ahead of the competition that come hither advertising or a lower price is not going to turn their heads. Children are not going to leave the family because some neighbor says, come, I'll give you better food. Okay? Alright, so here's your first takeaway. Develop an intimate relationship with your consumer. Remember, your value proposition is encapsulated in your brand, and every segment you address should understand your brand's value proposition to them at two levels. I'm not dismissing economics. Lots of people consider the price value proposition when they make purchases, particularly for durable products, refrigerators, automobiles, and the like. Don't ignore that. But don't forget that emotional connections are often dominant. They drive purchases, and you ignore them at your peril. Okay, so, yes?
So like this was regarding the test that we do, the sample size that we take and the undergraduate test, like the 1 million for the MRI. So do companies take use from these tests and try to incorporate it into their way of marketing?
Good question. And it is a question that I typically deal with in the last day of my class. What I'm presenting to you and what I present to my students are findings in the scientific literature that are based on the series of decisions that the researchers make with respect to the sample size, the setting, the particular stimuli they've used if they're running experiments, the particular choices they've made if they're using secondary data that are relevant to the population to which they're generalized. So if you're working for the Tatas, and I run an experiment in Minneapolis that demonstrates that higher prices lead to perceptions of higher quality, it may or may not be relevant. But it is a very good starting point to test a hypothesis. So you go to the academic literature and say, this is what those guys are finding, as opposed to if you're sitting in your office and wondering, geez, what should I think about when I think about pricing? I don't know. So let's run some tests in Calcutta and some tests in Nagpur and some. I don't have a good theory about what I'm looking for. If I look at the academic literature, at least there is a theory, and I can then use that as a hypothesis to see whether that works in my mind. Okay? So that's the caution I would give to all of you. Take what I'm saying as a starting point. It is not the final word. And I'm going to show you some other research evidence that is interesting, that is provocative, but is not the final word. So, at the end of the day, what is it that I'm advising you guys to do? Think about strategy is an attempt to create a monopoly. Okay? So when somebody makes a shopping list before going to buy groceries, and they shouldn't write cereal, they should write Cheerios. That's when I know I've got them. All the other brands are out of consideration set. Okay? So there are two ways I can do this. I'm not going to talk about the economics of it. I'm not going to talk about channels and patents and so forth. But there are many other ways that you can create monopolies. Most of the work that I've done looks at the psychological mechanisms available to create brand loyalty. So I'm going to shift gears now to the little formal world. So before I do that, any other questions about this little preamble? Yes, gotcha. So, this is another good question. What tends to happen, and this is anecdotal, so I'm not going to suggest that there is any good, strong evidence for it, but based on my observations, once somebody builds a brand, they begin to take it for granted. We've got a strong brand. And they stop nurturing it and feeding it and supporting it. Right? And so it tends to decline. So just because you've built a brand doesn't mean you can now ignore it. Like you need to constantly support it, you need to constantly refresh it, you need to constantly advertise, you need to constantly convey to consumers the reason to continue to be in that relationship, much like in other relationships, like a marital relationship or a friendship or a sibling relationship. You've got to keep it alive, right? So the answer to your question is, brands fall on their faces frequently because some brand steward forgot to feed it and to clothe it and to nourish it. Okay? You've got to keep at it. Okay, I'm going to ask you to make 3 assumptions as we walk through 2 examples of what is known as information economics. All consumers are rational. What does that mean? They maximize their utility. They know exactly what they want, they look for information, and they get what they look for. All firms are rational. They maximize their profits. They're not political organizations. They're not populated by managers, each one of whom is trying to get ahead of the other guy. They're all working towards a common goal. And there is free entry and exit for firms. There is no barriers to entry. Finally, some people care a great deal about quality, and some people care a great deal about price. Okay? With me on this? The very standard microeconomic approach to business. Now, I'm going to tell you a story. I grew up on the outskirts of Guwahati. many, many, many years ago. My father worked with railways. We lived in a little town called Maligaon. And our house was the last house in the colony. And behind the house was a bunch of hills, which was populated by Nepali cowherds, people who had cows in huts, and they used to deliver milk for us. And they used to deliver milk in these aluminum cans. There's one thing a Nepali cowherd knows to do is to dilute the milk with water to make more money. Right? And those of you who resonate with this experience, it's very hard to tell by looking at milk whether it has been diluted or not. Right? So this is a quality debasement problem that my mother faced. Right? The Nepali cowherd would come and say, I've got some milk to sell to you, and she'd look at it and say, how do I know the milk has not been diluted with water? Of course I wouldn't dilute it for you, maybe I'd like to dilute it for the other people, not for you. And how do you think she should resolve this problem? How do you make sure that you get good milk, or good anything that whose quality can be tampered with? What can you do? Remember, it's very hard to specify Nepali cows because it's very hard to distinguish one guy from the other. They have no brand identity. Okay? They're all called Kansha. Provide samples. You can give a sample. Say that again? Buy a lactometer. Okay? Quality assurance. I invest in a huge lactometer, and the guy brings his milk, I run these tests, and say, okay. It's an expensive thing to do. Anything else? Keep say what? They won't you. Keep changing the vendor. So Himanshu comes to me one day, gives me bad note. He says, I want, well, those days it was a rupee a liter, that's for the high quality milk, and the cheap milk should cost, the bad milk should cost 50. And so I pay him a rupee per liter, he gives me the 50 paise per liter milk. He's better off by 50 paise. And I never visit with him again, he's still better off. And the next guy does the same thing, I never get good milk. What else can I do? Vertical integration by a cow. Okay? So suddenly we'll start selling milk to other people and we can start cheating them. Okay? So acquire the means of production. Okay? All these, anything else? Yes? And up there.
Making card out of that by
Right, but that I don't know till the next day, whether it's good milk or bad. It takes overnight for the curds to form. But that's, yes. Huh. Now, why should he not take some more money and run away? What if I run away? Remember, this is a bilateral problem. He doesn't trust me either. Right? You're on something. Keep that stuff.
I'm from the same region, what we do, we offer a compost
from his milk from the previous year. So, but you can't tell the quality of milk from a peasant.
It's the kind of milk that we make the kind of intimate relationship.
Ah, he wants my mother to have a relationship with the milkman. Think about that. Think about that metaphor. This is taking customer intimacy to a new level. So, yes. Okay, so free ride off the marketplace, right? You go to another customer and ask them, but he might be honest with those people who might decide just to cheat me because I'm raising all these issues. So it turns out, here's what she did. Here's something to remember. Yes? But he can still order the milk afterwards, right? Yes, you want the relationship. You want to form a monopoly, a bilateral monopoly. Yes.
We can actually form a community which will buy in bulk from them.
Costly to organize. I'm trying to look for a cheap mechanism, relatively cheap, which doesn't include a lot of coordination costs, doesn't include buying a lactometer. revenue stream and a profit stream in perpetuity that is more attractive than the cheating revenue and the cheating profit. So if I cheat her, and I have to have a device to tell that the milk has not been diluted, which is to make the heat. If the yogurt comes out runny next day, I know I've been cheated. If it comes out first, then the likelihood is that I've not been cheated. Okay? So you need a means, a market device to check for quality, okay, which is unobservable, and it is at the discretion of the vendor to decide whether to provide high quality on every transaction. So quality is endogenous. Yes? Okay, there's the answer to your question. Look. I didn't plan on doing this to you, but I can actually calculate what premium I need to I'm not going to walk through this, but I can calculate what premium I need to pay to assure that the incentives are aligned between the seller and myself, right? And you're right, over time, other customers might turn to their vendors and say, hey, listen, Rob is doing this, I'm going to do the same thing, and raise the price and pay you more, and market prices will go up, and then you're going to have to pay a higher premium again. But the premium is to assure honesty. Okay? So this is a counterintuitive result. It's a counterintuitive finding, and I'll show you how this works in the real world. I made up parts of the story. What we're saying is there are conditions in the world in which in a transaction, one party doesn't know the quality that is being provided by the other party, and that is not revealed for a period of time. But then it is revealed. So to prevent yourself from being cheated, from being taken advantage of, from being subject to shirking by your sales force or by your corporate partners, right? What can you do to assure that they put in maximum effort in this situation, which is called a moral hazard problem? And one way is to pay more than they are asking for, so that it is costly for them to shirk. It is costly for them to debase quality. It is costly for them to cheat. Okay? And over time, that premium will increase. So, for example, does this actually happen in the real world? Let me give you two examples from the world of labor economics. In labor, what is the price? The price is your salary. So, if you look at the wages for secretaries of executives at investment banks, they are quite a bit higher than similarly qualified secretaries of executives at hotels. Why? Because if the secretary at an investment bank falls down on his or her job, there's a huge amount of money to be lost. Right? So the implicit contract between the investment banker and the secretary is, you better do a really good job. I will pay you a lot more than your peers are making. But if you should mess up in the future, not take that phone call, or not fulfill that contract in time, I will fire you. And what is your option once I fire you? You'll have to go work for some bozo at a hotel. And you'll make less money. Okay? A classic case in 1914, just as the First World War was starting, the Ford Motor Company increased their wages from $2.50 to $5 an hour. Huge increase. 100% increase. In those days, that was a lot of money. Suddenly there were lines outside the Ford plant in Detroit. The police had to be called in because there were riots, people fighting to get these jobs. Turnover declined, shirking declined. Everybody was working real hard because they didn't want to lose this job. Because it was really good money. This was a premium to prevent shirking, to reduce turnover, to reduce malingering, whole things where an employee could determine what level of quality to put in. So take that same principle and apply it to the world of product markets, or in actually specifically service markets, where quality can be debased on every occasion, and see if you can employ the same principle. Pay them more, and make yourself a valuable customer, and over time, you will develop this bilateral problem. The other question that comes up when I tell this story is, well, how do I know this guy? Remember I told you starting off, there are all the qualities I can't tell one guy from the other. This is why brands become important. That guy's got to find some way to reveal his true identity to you, either by making a tattoo on his right arm or something, to assure that he is the guy getting the trade. Okay? And this is a little peculiar view of the world. So, Mithra, do you have or we just stretch it? Okay. This is about that time of the session when people begin to stretch. Quickly, here's a picture of what is called a Thompson's gazelle. A Thompson's gazelle is prey for cheetah, essentially. And this guy on your far left, is obviously running from a cheetah. Cheetah decided, running, get the hell away from the cheetah.
In the same scenario, that message can also go out that I'm spending that normally large amount of money just to make up the quality or product and just to advertise it, push it through. That will happen, right?
So if you add it, yes. So that will only work. Remember my assumption initially. Consumers are rational. Okay? They're utility maximized. So they will tell if your product quality is bad. As soon as you relax that assumption, everything here falls apart. Okay? If consumers cannot tell, or if there are more frugal consumers out there somewhere who can be taken advantage of, then none of this works. It has to be full information about everything except quality. Quality is unobserved. Let me give you an example. Maybe this will make sense to you. So that was an ad in something called the Super Bowl. I don't know whether you're familiar with that. It's the end of the American football season. Very expensive advertising. And this is when electronic trading security was just starting. And everybody was worried. I give you all my money and it goes into this computer and what happens? What if the computer breaks down? And how do I know you can keep my money? Notice there was nothing about electronic trading in this ad. I just blew $2 million. What did they say? They say, trust me. I will be around because you and I know that Super Bowl ads cost $2 million. I have to recover this expenditure. And the only way I can recover this expenditure is if I'm a good guy and will take good care of your money. If I'm a bad guy and don't take good care of your money, that $2 million is gone. Okay? So, there are lots and lots of examples. Warranties is another example. Some car manufacturers give you 10-year warranties or lifetime warranty support. Warranties are expensive. You have to maintain a car that is declining in quality. And the only way it can work is if you really, really know that your car is good. The guys with bad cars will not be able to offer you the same warranty. Yes?
Who raised signal? Ideally, consumer raised signal. Then ideally higher quality. And I'm ready to pay premium for it.
Yeah. So let's be careful. The difference between what I'm talking about here and what I talk about with the milk, in the milk world, I can change quality every time. So there's no signal there. Here, my quality is fixed. I'm either a tough gazelle or I'm not. I'm either a good peacock or I'm not. I either have good electronic trading or I don't. Okay? I cannot change the quality every time. That's when the firm signals. The guy whose quality is suspect, the guy who consumers are going, I don't know whether you're good or not, is the guy signaling. There are times when I, as a consumer, can signal if I'm looking for a job, right? and the firm is the employer, I can signal by saying, look, I went to college, I went to XLRI, I went to a fine engineering school or whatever to demonstrate that I'm smart. So that is a signal of my unobservable ability, which is different from, will I work hard every day? That's the shirking behavior. That is the service part. And that is solved with price reviews. Different mechanisms, different phenomena. It's in the same family of problems. Okay? The problem being unobservable problem. Yes?
When we talk about advertising expenditures, so they are productive of movie. Like we see they overspend sometimes for advertising and it's movie not worth it because of the marketing and the network it works out. So sometimes asking very profitable because of the product.
Okay. That's a good question. And here's why it's a good question. In the world of movies and in the world of what are called experiential goods as distinguished from experience goods, okay, quality is much more subjective. In the world of milk, there is a good and bad quality. In the world of salespeople, I used to manage a sales force once upon a time. Good salespeople put in X number of sales calls a day. Bad salespeople put in 0.5 X number of sales calls a day. There is good and bad quality. So it is only when quality is well defined that any of this works. If quality is amorphous, I can go to the same movie as you. I will love it. You will hate it because I like action films and you like chick flicks. It's not going to work. It has to be. There has to be absolute difference. I saw another hand out here. Yes.
Right in with advertisement.
Yes.
We as a consumer can also think that they're blowing off their money. So
They're desperate.
and it is being they're being charged for it. So where do they get this money from? From the money that I pay for this product. So why do I have to pay this extra for the same?
Because I care about quality. Remember one of my assumptions earlier. If I'm price sensitive, I'm not their customer. If I care about prices, I'm not their customer. Let's go back to my assumptions. If I really care about quality, my mother really wanted good milk, right? So look at that last point there. On quality sensitivity, some consumers desire high quality, implicit. Some are more concerned about price. So you're thinking, you're wasting money and my prices are going up, right?
But then aren't we assuming that high price means high quality? Is that always right?
No, it isn't. So the minute you start questioning that, you're thinking, I'm paying too much for this level of quality. And so you fall into the price sensitive camp. It is the people who say, no, this is really important for me. My money ought to be safe, and I don't particularly care about spending too much. I just want to make sure my money is safe, right? Or if you're, let's say you're a manufacturer and you have customers who are willing to pay a lot of money for your product, but you have some component that you need that is of high quality. You don't care about its price. You care about its quality so that the end consumer is satisfied, from whom you are making a lot of money. So let's simplify the world into people who care about quality, people who care about price. Okay? I'll relax all these in a minute and may take you into the real world shortly. But keep in mind that there are worlds in which this works. Okay? There are rational worlds in which people behave like this, and you need to be able to tell which world you're operating in when. Okay? Yes. Correct first. Yes. Let's call it excessive. Let's call it what it is. Correct. Right. Right. So advertising is not the only way in which I can signal. I wrote a paper on this. Warranties, my investment in my brand name, sometimes very high prices. There are other ways in which I can provide signals to convince the consumer that I am a good guy. Okay? So let's not get caught up in advertising. Advertising is one way to do it. There are brands that don't advertise at all, that are very high quality because they have reputation. They have a presence in the market. And the key is, if they were to debase quality, how would that affect them? Would they lose something? So if a firm that advertises a great deal was to suddenly sell a low quality product, what would happen to it? It would lose sales, and it would not recover advertising expenditure. If a firm that offers a very good warranty was to sell a bad product, what would happen to it? It would have to fulfill its warranty obligations and would lose money. So the key is, the signal is effective if underlying that is the commitment that if I'm lying, I will lose a lot of money. Good. Exactly. And that's right. So remember that my world requires there to be information asymmetry. Nobody knows that this brand is of high quality. If everybody knows it's of high quality, then the problem's gone. Right? If everybody knows Bose is a good quality brand, then it doesn't need to say it. But if it's a new brand, nobody knows anything about it, how does it establish itself? E-Trade was a new brand. Nobody knows anything about it. Nobody knows anything about this industry. What do I do to convince consumers who are concerned about quality that I'm a good one? And one way is just to come in.
And expect there is a lot of money into them because they have this thing out of this 4-5 share money which gets capture the market. So to what extent this investment is justified? Like, they are putting a lot of money into these e-ventures and none of them is making a profit. But to what level is this investment is justified?
Okay, you are going into an arena about which I know little, but since I'm a professor, I don't need to know a whole lot about anything to offer an opinion. One simple answer is, give it time, and over time, if the return on their investment is insufficient, they will, through sheer market forces, die. And I bet some firms have died or are in the process of dying, or we don't know how they're doing in terms of return on their investment. We might actually discover that there are other ways in which they're making money or they're built future. A great example from my part of the world is how the Japanese automakers succeed. They invested for years in high quality automobiles at low prices, covered the market, and then they launched their luxury brands. And they're making money hand over fist. Okay? So if you have the long view and the industry is relatively stable, you can indeed make the case that we'll lose money for a while and okay, we have little time, so let me jump to chapter 3 here. Just to put an exclamation point on this. Information asymmetry, which is somebody knows more than somebody else about the quality of the product, exists in most markets. In every market, you pick any market. And I will show you some consumers who don't know the quality of the product relative to the manufacturer. Yes, David?
So we are discussing about quality here, and what we studied or heard that quality is a perception, right? It's a myth, and consumer is the person or the people who is least empowered about the quality. So how you define the quality?
Okay, so I'll sit on the fence in that one for a minute. Okay, there are some things such as objective quality. If there is a molecule in a pharmaceutical product, it has to have certain properties. If there is a carbonated soft drink, it has to have certain properties which meet the threshold level of performance. Over and above that, like I showed you the brain scans, quality is perceived. And I'll show you some examples of how we can manipulate that. So it's both are true. There is such a thing as objective quality, there is such a thing as engineering performance, there is something as specification, and then there are perceptions about how does the quality of this product meet the benefits I design. Okay? And we'll see a couple of examples of that.
In continuation to that, he gave the example of Bose, right? Most of the people sitting here didn't use the Bose, but we still know that Bose has got a very good quality, right? Without using a Bose quality system, that it has got good quality. So is it not about the create bubble of perception or something like that?
Oh, I see. That's a question you ask. Well, yes. So the brand has embedded in it perceptions of quality. There is probably 1,500 academic articles on the association between brand and quality perception, how you build that and how you sustain this, which is independent of whether people actually use the product and actually know whether it's of high quality or not. Blind taste tests of products or experiences between different stereo systems. People, wine is a good example. People claim to know a lot about the quality of wine. Turns out that they can't tell it red from white wine. If I give you a blind taste of red wine and a white wine infused with a red food dye, even experts are not able to distinguish between the two because the vision of cue is so powerful. So yeah, you're right. There is a huge perceived component. We'll see some of that in about five minutes. Okay. Okay, so just remember that just because there's information asymmetry in the market, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. In fact, it can be a good thing. Because you can come in and on your white horse and say, be careful, you don't know whether this product is going to work or not, there's uncertainty about performance, trust me. I have a brand name I'm proud of. And if this product fails, you know who to go after. So I will resolve the information asymmetry to my advantage. And it is really important that you understand the dynamics of that marketplace to take advantage of your brand name to resolve this. So make your brand the source of reassurance about unobservable quality. Okay, final chapter. Let's get rid of all these rational people. The consumers, the firms. Let's look at the real world in which we actually live. Let me give you two examples. Here's one scenario. You've always wanted a particular type of car. In fact, you entered every sweepstakes that offers such a car as a prize. Again, this year you did not win, but you did receive a registered letter from another source that you have won a football pool worth $50,000. After receiving the money, you see the car that you've always wanted in the showroom. Its price, non-negotiable, is 50 lakhs. You've always wanted a particular type of car. In fact, you enter every sweepstakes that offers such a car as a prize. This year you receive a registered letter which informs you that you won first prize, which is the choice of either the car you've always wanted or 50 lakhs. So in the first case, you get the money and you can get the car. In the second case, you can either get the car or the money. In which of these two cases do you think people will take the car? The second one? Okay, raise your hand, second one. Hey, raise your hands, first one. The rest of you don't care about cars? Alright. How many of you say they're identical situations? It doesn't really matter. It's the rational choice, and you flip a coin, and you'll see what happens. Well, it turns out that, let's think about this. In one case, you have received the money, and now you have to give it up. In another case, you haven't received the money, you get a car for the money. It turns out that once you receive the money, giving it up is painful. Okay? This is a phenomenon called loss aversion. Think about this. If you put your hand in your pocket and you discover 100 bits, it will hurt. Yeah, that's nice. You put your hand in your pocket looking for the 100 rupees that you put in there this morning and it's not there, it's like, oh my God. The disutility associated with a loss is roughly 2.5 times greater than the utility associated with a gain of equivalent economic magnitude. And we capture that in something called the prospect theory value function, which is a simple, elegant description of this phenomenon. If I make 100 rupees, this is the value associated with it. If I lose 100 rupees, that's the value associated with it. Look how much longer that is compared to that. This simple graph. So the previous, all the information economics stuff I showed you was what led to the Nobel Prize for Akerlof, Stiglitz, and Spence. This is what led to the Nobel Prize for Danny Kahneman. Because it turns out it has implications for a host of worlds, including ours. Let me show you some examples. Oh, these are the technical aspects of this. I will not go into this. Let me give you an example. How do you recognize that name? J.S. Connors. A very timely reminder of a man called James Scott Connors, better known as Jimmy Connors. Anybody recognize that name?
Yes.
Okay, good. Because there was a time when the ABC of young tennis was undergraduate Borg and Connors. Undergraduate Borg quit the tour early. Connors continued till at the age of 39 he was playing at the US Open. And his birthday always occurred at the US Open. So one of the commentators was asking, what are you doing? You're never going to win this thing. And he said, I hate to lose more than I like to win. Which is his way of saying, he lost the previous year, so he had to come back the next year to win a couple of matches to compensate for the loss the previous year. Okay? So, the loss hurts, and one game does not compensate sufficiently. Okay, here's another example. This is a restaurant close to my office. Here is a menu from, penne from heaven. The flavor of the little flavor, etc., etc. $6.99, spaghetti $8.99, lasagna $7.99, and so forth. And here's another menu, identical, $10.49, $11.49, $11.49, and so forth. Identical menu, higher price for the second menu than the first. So one evening I was going to be teaching an evening class. I was getting hungry. I went there a little before 5 o'clock and asked for the menu. They gave me the first menu, and then exactly at 5 o'clock the waiter came and said, no, I gave you the wrong menu. I've got to give you this one. So he gave me this one. I said, no, I want the first one back. He said, no, we can only serve this. And I said, this is interesting. These prices are higher, but the quantities are. He said, no, it's the same thing. I said, well, okay, dinner prices are higher than lunch. Can I get copies of this menu? Because I was teaching a pricing class. He said, I'd better go talk to the manager. The manager came and said, what's the problem? He said, well, your menus are interesting. I want a copy. He said, why? I said, well, I teach at the university and I want to show it to my students. Oh, just make sure that they know it's the grandma's menu. So every time I tell the story, I tell the audience that it's a menu from this restaurant, grandma's. And he said, why do you find my menu interesting? I said, well, why do you charge more for dinner than you do for lunch? He said, no, we don't. We charge less for lunch than we do for dinner. You see what he did? He took an economically equivalent choice problem and turned it upside down. Okay? Framed it as a gain rather than as a loss. Why? Because people prefer discounts to premiums. And you see this phenomena in lots and lots of worlds. If you ever go into the selling of durables, people walk into your shop, buy a car, buy a stereo. If you want to sell them an extended warranty, do it then. Because they have lost, right, the price. They're down here somewhere. Selling them a little bit more takes them just a little bit further down. If instead you wait for them to come back a month later and then try to sell them separately, they lose much more. Okay? So there are lots of implications of this for our world. Okay, two quick stories and then I'll let you go. Imagine India is preparing for the outbreak of an unusual Asian disease which is expected to kill 600 people. There are two alternative programs. If program A is adopted, 200 people will be saved. If program B is adopted, there's a 1/3 probability that all 600 will be saved, and a 2/3 probability that nobody will be saved. So, which do you prefer, A or B? B? A? Show hands. Program A. Okay, program B. And the rest of you, let them all die. There are lots of people who are not raising their hands. Okay, so here's what we found. A has a 72% preference. Okay, this is not the interesting part comes in the next slide. Imagine that India is prepared for the outbreak of an unusual Asian disease, which is expected to kill 600 people. There are two alternative programs. If program A is adopted, 400 people will die. If program B is adopted, there's a 1/3 probability that nobody will die, and a 2/3 probability that 600 people will die. Okay? Now which program do you prefer, A or B? So the preference for A drops to 22%. Okay? What is this telling me? This tells me that in the domain of losses, the risk preferences are different than in the domain of gains. In the domain of gains, people are risk averse. They'll take the sure thing relative to the probabilistic outcome. In the domain of losses, the stochastic outcome is much more likely because you don't want people to die for sure. Okay? This has huge implications for the insurance business, for the gambling industry, lots and lots of situations where outcomes are uncertain. But there's some probability that you can attach. The word of warrants. Okay. Here is an example of something very peculiar. This is from an old ad. There are three internet service providers plans available. One has, you can't read this, but 25 times faster than 565 kilobytes per second, 53 times faster than 565 kilobytes per second, and 5 times faster. So this is clearly the lowest quality, this is the highest quality, this is down the middle. This guy is priced the same as this guy. So the middle guy and the lowest quality guy are priced the same. So if I put this in a graph, it looks like this. Imagine that you've got two options. One is really good in safety and one is really good in convenience, but the safety guy is lousy in convenience and the convenience guy is lousy in safety, and they both have 50% market share. Okay? Let's say I introduce a third option. That is moderate on safety but lousy in convenience. What should happen?
Because they get the benchmark.
Say that again?
Because we see things in relative manner. The option of moderate safety gives a better option to the high safety. It proves that it is better overall.
So what should happen to market share?
It will increase, high safety will increase.
Good. Oops, sir. That guy's market share goes up to 60%. Notice, nothing shouldn't happen. Okay? Because moderate safety is irrelevant. It's dominated by both ways. Right? Question is, why does this happen? And one of my PhD students did his dissertation examining this. Again, he put people in an MRI machine and we looked at the data and the activation. And I'll show you the brain scans really quickly, but I'll show you the results. So these are the areas that are activated under the presence of the third option. When the third irrelevant option is available, here's what it means. When the decoy, that third guy is called the decoy, is present, two interesting things happen. The amygdala is the seat of negative emotion, irritation, gets deafened. So if you have two options, one is good on something and one is good on something else, it's hard to make a choice. It's irritating. I give you a third option that is dominated. This one looks better than this one. That's an easy choice. Okay? And the other is I use heuristics, what I just described. Which one is better, as opposed to not being able to use heuristics. Don't ever